Stalin is a big name. Everybody knows the name Stalin, but I don't think many people know about Stalin. I don't really know about Stalin. I kind of know because I do a lot of Russian history, but the average person doesn't do as much Russian history searching as I do, and I still don't really know about Stalin like that. So we got a short little Stalin documentary. I think he's a good person to start it off. So welcome to episode 1 of Maniac Reacts to History. Let's do it. I don't know if I need a filter for a YouTube video. Maybe. Only one way to find out. Oh yeah.
A revolutionary and a general, a great modernizer and a ruthless tyrant, Joseph Stalin could claim to be them all. One of the most influential figures of the 20th century, he would rise from humble...
Yeah, we know that.
...and the leader of the Soviet Union, one of the world's largest superpowers, being unafraid to sacrifice anything or anyone to achieve power. His political opponents would be shot, his own citizens would be hunted down by the secret police, and millions would be sentenced to backbreaking work in the Gulag labor camps.
That's that communism, man.
Of Joseph Stalin.
He said you get hunted down by the secret police. It's kind of insane. We'll be pausing it a lot, I think.
Joseph Stalin was born on December 6th, 1870.
What did he say his name was?
Joseph Juvashvili, later to be known as Joseph Stalin.
Joseph Juvashvili.
In the small Georgian town of Gori, on the outskirts of the Russian Empire. His mother was a skilled dressmaker, and his father...
I did find that. Just a little bit of background. I just watched a Lenin documentary earlier today or yesterday, one of those. So I was thinking that the best person to follow up with was Stalin. So I held off on the Stalin reading and trying to hold as much Stalin knowledge as I could get back for this reaction. So I would be going in pretty dry, but I do remember them saying that he was from Georgia and he joined in the Lenin's Russian party.
But it was not to last. His father would turn to drink and began beating him, eventually abandoning the family entirely.
A lot of people were drinking back then, man. Oh, my apologies. This isn't going to get copyright claimed. I can turn this up so y'all can hear it.
Would send him off to a theological school, where she hoped he could climb the social hierarchy by becoming a priest. Stalin was a model student, known for his hard work and his singing in the church choir. But as he entered his late teenage years, he would become disillusioned with religious life. During his third year at the seminary, he would join an illegal book club, becoming inspired by the stories of the fictional Georgian hero Koba, a name he would later use as his own during his early years as a revolutionary. He would also be highly influenced by the works of Karl Marx and his theories known as Marx.
I've noticed a lot of people did that. I guess political dissonance was not really, enjoyed like that in the 1900s, because a lot of people who were into politics when they were young, they would use pseudonyms. Lenin wasn't his real name, Stalin's not his real name. I watched someone in Ukraine, they didn't have their names, but a lot of people just didn't use their real names back then.
One of the most popular forms of socialism at the time. Stalin would soon develop an interest in politics and would become involved with a group of Social Democrats, a revolutionary socialist party who aimed to overthrow the Russian monarchy. As Stalin's involvement in revolutionary politics continued to grow, his grades and reputation at the seminary would begin to decline, with him being expelled in 1899 after failing to attend his daily prayers and being found in the possession of illegal literature.
Oh, legal literature. I thought it was going to be illegal inhalants.
At the age of 22, following a wave of harsh crackdowns by the authorities, Stalin would leave his old life behind and go into hiding, becoming a full-time revolutionary. Despite his young age, he would be described by his colleagues as exceptionally vicious and vindictive, willing to apply the most extreme measures in his attempts to dominate the party. with him soon rising to the top of the local revolutionary leadership. Stalin would soon find himself drawn to the teachings of Vladimir Lenin, the leader of a socialist faction known as the Bolsheviks, who followed a more radical and militant course of action. Stalin would quickly become a leading Bolshevik in Georgia and the surrounding area, and while living with a colleague, he would meet his first wife, Yekaterina Svanitsa.
If y'all have never heard of the Bolshevik Revolution, I highly, 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 highly recommend that you watch. You learn about it. You can listen to a Lenin documentary, a Lenin video. I know y'all don't like documentaries, so you can find a Lenin TikTok or Bolshevik Revolution TikTok. I highly, highly, highly recommend. That sets the stage for so much that happens in the 1900s. You got to learn about the Bolshevik Revolution. Let's get it.
With the couple marrying in 1906,
It might be
less than a
something
year
here,
later,
but
Stalin's
definitely
first
find
son, Yakov, would be
a
born.
solo.
But the dangerous
solo
life of a
video just talking
revolutionary
about
did
the
not mix
revolution.
well with family. After travelling to the city of Baku with her husband, Yekaterina would fall seriously
Yeah, man,
ill,
Dragon hasn't
dying
seen his
in November
son
1907.
like
Her death
ever
would have a profound
because he's
effect
a
on Stalin,
revolutionary.
and at
Family
the funeral he
revolutionary
would
don't
state,
work.
"This creature softened my heart of stone. She died, and with her died my last warm feelings for humanity." Unable to deal with his grief, Stalin would abandon his 8-month-old son Yakov to be raised by his mother's family, not returning to see him for several years. As the years went on,
What did I just say? He's on his dragon timing. First you become a revolutionary, then you drop your son at the baby off with somebody and you don't ever see them for years. He's
Stalin
cooking,
would
man.
rise
He's
through the
cooking.
ranks of the Bolsheviks,
You know he's
becoming
gonna be
known for his
great.
ruthless methods, raising money
You
through
don't
armed
see your son
robberies,
as a
protection
revolutionary,
rackets, and
you're
ransoms.
destined for big
In
things.
1912, he would adopt the name Stalin, meaning man of steel. But Stalin's newfound fame would also make him a high priority.
That's another thing about history. There's so many names, like Rockefeller, Stalin meaning like man of steel. There's so many fire names that you just can't use anymore because it's like, oh, they're associated with this person. But Stalin meaning man of steel, like Stalin was already a cool name. The fact that it means man of steel just made it even cooler.
Target for
You
the
can't like
police.
name your son
In
Stalin or
1913,
something.
he
That's
would be caught
crazy.
and sentenced to 4 years of exile in Siberia, an inhospitable region of eastern Russia. It would be one of Stalin's lowest points. During this period, he suffered with poor health and became increasingly depressed in his isolation, with the 35-year-old seeking companionship with a local 14-year-old girl, with it being rumoured the two had a child together. He would the local 14-year-old girl isolation, with the 35-year-old seeking companionship with a local 14-year-old girl, with it being rumoured the two
Police, open up. Police. FBI, CPS, somebody. So out of all the things Stalin was, you can add pedophiles to the list. That's
two had a child together.
crazy.
He would slowly stop producing revolutionary works, and in 1950
And it's because of his depression too, guys. Because of his depression and his isolation, he was a victim of his own mindset and he touched a 14-year-old. That's insane. It's insane that the documentary worded it like that too. I mean, I guess this isn't a hit piece. This is supposed to be like an objective documentary. That's a crazy way of saying that he was sleeping with a 14-year-old.
Lenin
Possibly
would famously
13
forget
because
his
they had a
last
child
name.
together.
For
Who knows
Stalin,
when he
it
started?
appeared the revolutionary dream was over.
I also want to say as a disclaimer, we're so deep in here, the disclaimer probably should have came before. I am not a Stalin supporter. It's like, fuck this guy. I don't like him. I don't like the things he did. I'm probably titling this video the most evil man of the 1900s because that's my view of him going in there. So, just because we're watching a documentary doesn't mean I co-sign this man or any of his actions. I know a lot of people nowadays have a, like, cognitive dissonance where they can't understand people wanting to learn about people they don't like. But I just like learning things. So no, I don't like Stalin. I'm not a Stalin supporter. Just fuck this guy. Let's get back into it.
In 1917, while still in exile, Stalin would receive the news that he had been working towards for over 15 years. Revolution had taken place in Russia. Russia's population, over 100 million people, had suffered years of oppression, discontent and poverty. Coupled with the horrendous failures of the First World War and the personal failings of Russia's monarch, Tsar Nicholas II would be executed, ending 300 years of his family's rule, with a provisional government being established to take control of the country. Stalin was soon released from his exile and made his way back to central Russia with a renewed sense of purpose. But his mentor Lenin was still unsatisfied, calling for yet another revolution that would see a socialist government take power. However, there was significant resistance within the party towards his ideas, with Stalin openly expressing his opposition. To get Stalin on his side, Lenin would give him a place on the Bolshevik Central Committee, granting him a large amount of influence and his first real taste of power. Stalin would quickly devote himself to Lenin's cause, and that October, the Bolsheviks would stage a second revolution, removing the provisional government from power and establishing themselves as leaders of the country.
That's the one y'all gotta go see.
As a leading Bolshevik, Stalin was now one of the most powerful men in the country. But the struggle was not finished. The revolution would lead to 5 years of civil war, an exceptionally brutal period that would shape Stalin into the cruel and ruthless leader he would later become. During the civil war, he would be appointed to the city of Tsaritsyn by Lenin to acquire grain for the Bolsheviks and to organize the local fighting forces. But lacking any military knowledge or experience, Stalin would completely mishandle the situation, and after just 2 months under his command, the city was on the verge of collapse, with many soldiers having died under his command. Faced with this disaster, Stalin would turn to a technique that would later become a staple of his political career. He would begin the use of terror. The disaster was soon blamed on counter-revolutionaries, spies and saboteurs, who were arrested, convicted on weak or fabricated evidence, and then executed. Stalin became known for being particularly brutal in his use of terror.
It's literally like, oh, I suck at doing my job? Well, let me just kill anybody who opposes me. Let me kill anybody because I do a bad job instead of getting better at it.
Burning down entire villages and arresting anyone who dared to argue with him. He was highly suspicious of military personnel, who he would often target in his purges, bringing him into conflict with the head of the army, Leon Trotsky, who saw Stalin as a dangerous political rival. Trotsky would express his grievances to Lenin, leading to Stalin's removal from Tsaritsyn and beginning a lifelong rivalry between the two men, a conflict from which only one of them would survive. In 1922, the same year the Soviet Union was formally established, Stalin would be elected to the position of General Secretary, a role he would use to secure his rise to power. The position allowed him to set the agenda for meetings of the Politburo and the Soviet government, as well as placing the careers of numerous Soviet officials in his hands, giving him a large and loyal following. But towards the end of 1922, a power vacuum would emerge at the highest levels of Soviet government when Lenin became seriously ill, suffering a number of strokes that impeded his ability to govern the country. But to Stalin's horror, Trotsky would manage to form an alliance with the dying Soviet leader, giving him a significant advantage in the power struggle. Stalin would respond by calling Lenin's wife and subjecting her to a torrent of abusive language, an event that would be so upsetting to Lenin that he would call for Stalin's removal from government. While Stalin managed to keep his position, a rift had opened between him and Lenin, the most influential and respected man in the country, putting his political career in a very dangerous position. But in 1924, Lenin...
I'm 5'6", and I don't subscribe to the little man syndrome thing, but if there is anyone in history with little man syndrome, I don't even know how tall Stalin is. But he's definitely the poster child of little man syndrome. I gotta stop pausing. We're 16 minutes in.
To reshape their relationship in the eyes of the public. And so he would take control of the funeral, giving himself the politically significant role as one of Lenin's pallbearers. Lenin would be enshrined in Moscow's Red Square, with Stalin portrayed as the protector of his legacy in Soviet propaganda. Trotsky, his hated rival, was given the wrong date for the funeral, causing him to miss the event entirely. Over the next
I just want to say, because he did say it in there, Stalin was the reason why he got the wrong date. Like, Stalin set it up so this man got the wrong date for the funeral. And Stalin was, like he said, he was put himself as a major role in the funeral. Yeah, he was setting all that stuff up. And when he was sending old boy the invite, he was like, nah, wrong place, wrong date. So bro showed up, like, I think it was like 2 days late to Stalin's funeral. I mean, to Lenin's funeral. That's not a good look. It's not a good look at all.
few years, Stalin would expertly manipulate events to secure his rise to power, pitting his rivals against each other, and eventually amassing enough support to strip Trotsky of his position in government. With his main political opponent gone, there were few left to oppose Stalin. He would systematically demote, arrest, and exile his political opponents, and by 1928, he would emerge as the sole leader of the country. Having secured absolute power, Stalin began transforming the Soviet Union into a modern superpower. In 1931, he would state, "We are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it, or we shall be crushed." He would begin a policy of rapid industrialization, launching a series of 5-year plans to grow Soviet industry. But the implementation of these plans would be chaos. Ignoring the advice of economic experts, Stalin would double and then triple production targets, nearly none of which would actually be met. Inflation was rampant, money was spent with no budget, and entire factories were constructed with only half-finished blueprints. But despite this, production did see a notable increase, securing the Soviet Union's place as a modern industrial nation. To support industry, a policy of forced collectivization was implemented, where peasants, the country's largest group of people, were stripped of their private property and forced to work for the state on collective farms. Anyone who refused was beaten, shot, or sent to labour camps, known as gulags, where they would be used for slave labour. But the policy would be met with extreme resistance, with many peasants preferring...
Okay, question for y'all. Do y'all think, like, if you're a good leader, people would, like, want to fight for your cause? I don't know. I feel like that's, like, a major point about being a leader, being charismatic, and, like, wanting you people to, like, fight for you, work for you, rather than they feel like you work for them. I don't know. I just feel like a good leader's supposed to, like, if you were really, doing your job right, you wouldn't need, like, labor camps and slave labor and gulags. Couldn't you just, make it worth their while, make them believe that this is the right thing to do? I feel like that's what you're supposed to do as a leader, and this man is
to burn their crops and slaughter their animals, rather than let them be taken by the state. In some instances, Stalin's response was extreme, with villages that refused to comply being bombed out of existence by the Air Force. With the peasants...
This man was carpet bombing civilians? His own...
Lacking any economic incentive to work, agricultural production saw a massive decline, soon leading to a devastating famine. Reaching its peak in the winter of 1932 and 1933, the famine is estimated to have caused the death of up to 7 million people, with millions more being left permanently disabled. Parents would sell their children for food, with the countryside seeing widespread cases of disease, banditry, and cannibalism. Anyone who kept stores of grain was accused of hoarding, and were beaten and tortured until they gave up their supplies. The famine would hit Ukraine the hardest, with 3.5 million people dying there alone. The Ukrainians would call the famine the Holodomor, a name that means murder through starvation. Stalin would only make things worse, exporting 2 million tons of food out of the Ukraine and forbidding those that lived there to move away. Their only option was to wait and die, with thousands of starving people turning to cannibalism to survive. But for Stalin, the countryside had been brought under control. Although it had cost the lives of millions and had reduced the peasants to slaves of the state, it was a price he was willing to pay to feed the industrial workers.
Communism doesn't work, FYI.
But as the 1930s went on, Stalin would become increasingly paranoid of those around him, constantly searching for traitors and conspiracies, and looking for ways to secure his power. He would...
See, that's the thing. When you rise to power by snaking, being underhanding, and manipulating, you're going to attract people who do underhanded tactics and manipulate. So now you're going to be too worried about people around you because you're a snake. So you're going to be around snakes. You're going to be looking for snakes. And now you can't do your job because you're too busy spending all your time being paranoid looking for snakes.
First targets his political opposition with the assassination of Soviet politician Sergei Kirov, providing a pretext for convicting his most influential opponents of conspiracy. Between 1936 and 1938...
I know I gotta stop pausing. Conspiracy is the dumbest charge ever. It literally just means you were thinking about... I text my friends all the time when I'm mad. I'm gonna start a riot. I'm gonna do a riot. I'm guilty of like 32 counts of conspiracy. Just for that. Conspiracy is the dumbest charge ever.
A series of show trials would be held, where the accused would be convicted on fabricated evidence, tortured into giving a confession, and then shot. The old Bolsheviks were targeted, those who had been around since before the revolution, and retained strong political opinions and influence. They would be replaced by young politicians, who could be easily manipulated and were completely loyal to Stalin, knowing never to question his judgment. Army officers soon came into the firing line, as Stalin believed their power and influence had grown too strong.
To run a society.
Many were convicted of working as agents for Trotsky, with over 35,000 officers being shot or imprisoned, and the Navy losing every single one of its admirals. But soon the purges would extend to every corner of Soviet society. Ordinary citizens were encouraged to report suspicious friends and family to the authorities, many of whom would do so out of fear of being targeted themselves. The secret police were also appointed a new leader, Nikolai Yezhov, who would set his officers arrest and execution orders, often purging his own staff to impress Stalin. At only 5 feet tall, he was soon nicknamed the Bloody Dwarf, true to his enthusiasm for torturing his victims. Between 1937 and 1938,
okay, so this
average of torturing his victims.
So this guy next to Stalin is 5 foot. Stalin's a good 6 foot, man. I was training him Little Man Syndrome.
Between 1937 and 1938, an average of 1,500 people were killed every day, a period known as the Great Terror. Around 1.6 million people were arrested, 700,000 of which were executed, with an unknown number dying in labour camps and torture chambers. Stalin's paranoia had become extreme, with a colleague describing him as suspicious to the point of insanity. His purges would also have a devastating effect on Soviet society, with a culture of fear and distrust emerging. Those working in industry were afraid to suggest any changes or innovations that could get them accused of sabotage, leading to a slowdown in economic growth. The military were particularly affected, and would suffer from an extreme shortage of experienced commanders, with discipline and quality suffering as a result. And with war on the horizon, the purges could not have come at a worse time. As the Great Terror began to wind down, international relations were reaching a boiling point, with Europe soon erupting into World War II. Stalin would initially sign a non-aggression pact with Hitler, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which allowed him to invade and take over large parts of Eastern Europe once the conflict began. These territories would quickly find themselves subject to the same oppression experienced in the Soviet Union for decades. The most notorious example of this was the Katyn massacre of 1940, where almost 22,000 Polish prisoners were killed to prevent any ideological opposition from emerging. That same year, a Soviet agent would also manage to hunt
I thought there was like a
Stalin's
riot or something when
rival,
they said 22.
Leon Trotsky, assassinating him with an ice pick in Mexico City. But soon, things would turn against Stalin, with Hitler breaking their non-aggression pact and launching a surprise invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941. The Soviet army, completely unprepared and weakened by Stalin's purges, would suffer devastating losses, with Stalin himself entering a state of shock. Just a week after the invasion began, Stalin would disappear from the government and began hiding away in his Moscow home with a terrified group of...
This isn't even like kind of leadership. Like, it's not even remotely akin to leadership. This man, he ran the country terribly, had famine, hunger, purges, thought he could buddy up with Hitler and try and just take over territory nearby. And when Hitler changes his mind, now you're fucked.
Of officials being forced to approach him to convince him to lead the war effort.
And then
But
you run
Stalin's
away!
military leadership would be
After you're
filled with the same brutal
you run
tactics he had
away.
employed throughout his career. He would insist that every inch of ground be held, giving the death sentence to those who surrendered, leading to the pointless loss of thousands of men. Those deemed to be fearmongers or cowards were placed in special penalty battalions, who would be sent to their death at the start of battles to help reduce enemy ammunition. Taking this further, he would make it illegal to be taken prisoner, with the families of prisoners and deserters being stripped of their government pensions and arrested. Terror was also used to maintain army discipline, and just 4 months after the outbreak of war, over 10,000
was
members
there
of the
during
army
World
had been
War
shot by
II,
their superiors, often directly
shit
in
would've
front of
been
their
different.
comrades.
That's
But
all I'm
despite this
saying.
brutality, the tide would soon turn, with a combination of Soviet heroism, Russian heavy industry, and Western
Lenin
assistance
wasn't the
pushing the
greatest or
Germans
anything,
back.
but this man is
By
literally
1944,
awful.
Nazi Germany were in full retreat, with the Soviets claiming a large portion of Eastern Europe and eventually capturing Berlin itself. But it had come at the cost of 25 million lives, the highest death toll for any country in the Second
That's
World
just
War.
not strategy.
Victory in the war would greatly benefit Stalin's dictatorship, with Soviet propaganda portraying him as a hero. At home, his rule was unquestioned, and he now owned a vast empire that spanned over 2 continents. From his humble beginnings in
hero?
Georgia, he had risen to be the leader of the second most powerful country on earth, surpassed only by the United States. With his new territory spanning from the Baltic to the Adriatic Sea, Stalin would assert his influence over Eastern Europe, with Churchill stating that an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent. The Cold War had begun, a conflict that would come to dominate the rest of the 20th century.
I think we're
with
gonna do that one
Stalin
next. If
battling
y'all
the
like
West for
this,
control and
we're
ideological
gonna do the Cold War
influence in Europe
documentary next.
for the last years of his life.
That one might be on a Wednesday though, because can't do this in anime. This is just a short
Although he had
documentary.
achieved absolute
Most of
power,
these be like 40,
Stalin
50
would struggle
minutes.
with his personal image. He was a man of small stature, measuring at only 5 feet 4 inches tall. He would often wear shoes with thick stature. Stalin would struggle with his personal image.
I called
He was a
it!
man of small stature,
I called
measuring
it!
at only 5 feet 4 inches tall. He would often wear shoes with thick soles.
Oh yeah,
to
me
make
and
himself
Stalin can get
appear
at it,
taller.
man.
His face was also
See me
heavily
back
marked
there.
from
I'm
the
gonna be
scars
the
he had
leader
obtained
of the
after contracting
USSR.
smallpox in his youth. He would take every measure to hide them, employing makeup artists and airbrushing photographs to make his face appear smoother. Those that met him were often shocked by the small and disfigured man they would see, far
Bro's
different
just
from the heroic
constantly
figure
insecure.
portrayed
You
in
can just
Soviet
tell by
propaganda.
everything he does.
But in his final years,
Even the way he
Stalin had
rules.
become paranoid and lonely, having no one around him he could trust. He had arrested and killed a number of his own family during the Great Terror, and his first son, Yakov, had been captured and killed during the Second World War. Stalin had also married a second wife, Nadezhda Alliluyeva, in 1919, although he would be consistently unfaithful, with Nadezhda committing suicide in 1932 after the couple had a public argument. Their children, Svetlana and Vasily, would both experience difficulties as children of a dictator. Vasily was an arrogant and irresponsible young man, becoming accustomed to being treated like royalty. During the war, he would become a 24-year-old general, but acted with a total lack of responsibility. He would go fishing with his subordinates, using explosives to stun the fish, leading to the death of an officer. He would also struggle with alcoholism, and had contracted a number of chronic diseases by his 30th birthday.
Fatherless behavior.
After his father's death, he would be
What can I
imprisoned
say?
after a drunken outburst, dying in exile at the age of 40. While Svetlana received more love and
Yeah,
attention,
fatherless
she would
behavior.
often come into conflict with her father over her relationships, with Stalin once arresting a boyfriend he disapproved of. Their once warm relationship would grow distant as the years went on, with Svetlana choosing to defect to the United States after her father's death.
She's real.
Stalin's health would begin to seriously decline in his final years, due to years of smoking, drinking, and overwork. He would suffer a debilitating stroke on March 1st, 1953, in his Moscow home. His guards, terrified of upsetting him, would refuse to enter his room without permission, with it taking hours before they found the courage to enter, finding him lying immobilized on the floor. His top associates were quickly
smoking
summoned,
that
but even they were
pack.
too afraid to take any real action. Stalin had recently become convinced that his own doctors were trying to kill him, and it would take many hours before anyone was confident enough to call a medical professional. But by then it was too late, with it being determined that the dictator had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, with him dying on March 5th, 1953, after several days of paralysis, having lived to the age of 74. Joseph Stalin will go down as one of history's most notorious leaders. He can be credited with transforming the Soviet Union into a modern superpower and for leading the country through the Second World War, but it came at an immense cost. Between 1930 and 1952, over 26 million people had been shot, imprisoned, or subjected to internal exile, an average of over 1 million per year. Tens of millions more would be arrested without charge, evicted from their homes, or forced to work on dangerous projects, with it being estimated that at least 60 million people had been subjected to some form of repression during Stalin's rule. But despite this, many Soviet citizens would remain devoted to their leader. The state produced an endless stream of propaganda.
Bro, propaganda is crazy, bro.
Figure. Paintings, songs.
Like, I love America. I love everything we do here. The amount of stuff you can get away with if you just tell a good story, you make people feel a certain way. Propaganda be going crazy when you find out how many news outlets the government owns or influences and whatnot, and then you find the truth about things. It's just like, oh, we were lied to. It's crazy. Propaganda.
And statues were all commissioned by the dictator, with several towns and cities being named after him.
Don't forget to put the bumps on there.
Books would distort events beyond recognition, and he would go as far as to doctor historical photographs, removing his political rivals from important events in Soviet history. This propaganda would be incredibly effective.
This nigga was photoshopping pictures.
Grief at his death,
this man was photoshopping
without
pictures.
His leadership. Even prisoners in the Gulag, many of whom Stalin had sent there himself, are known to have wept at the news of his passing. Hero or tyrant, a great modernizer or a ruthless killer, there can be no doubt that Stalin was one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, whose legacy has shaped the world as we know it today.
How y'all feeling? I feel like I don't want to say Russian propaganda, but he could have gone a lot harder. I mean, I guess this wasn't a morality check type of documentary. It wasn't on that timing. It was nice, objective, maybe a little too objective. Especially when they're talking about him and that little girl. But yeah, fuck Stalin. I think the title of most evil man in the 1900s, it's fitting. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about this. If you like history too, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat. I would love for this to be an ongoing thing. And YouTube, if you're seeing this on YouTube and you see that I'm still streaming on Twitch, but you don't see these videos uploaded to YouTube, they're probably going to be Rumble exclusive. I don't know how YouTube is about, truth telling and all that, but I'm getting these documentaries from YouTube, so we should be good. I heard they like giving out strikes. I'm not monetized, so I don't have to worry about getting demonetized. But if the videos just stop getting uploaded, check out my Rumble channel. We get lit over there. But man, that was a doozy. Fuck Stalin, little man syndrome. But that was good knowledge though. Like, even though I dislike him even more now, but I'm happy I watched that. So I just like knowing things. I like learning things. I like feeling vindicated. Like, I was like, I don't like this guy, but I don't really know I don't like this guy. Let me check why I don't like this guy. And here I am, not liking this guy. So I feel like I was right, and that was fun. I like that. Come back probably next Wednesday. I don't think I'm gonna do it on Tuesday again, cause we got anime to watch. But yeah, come back next Wednesday, or maybe this weekend, for our Cold War documentary. Let me know in the comments if you like this. If you made this far in this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace out.